guess we are live. There's some loading going on here. Let's see. All right. Gotta do a couple of things here. It's so strange post commenting into the nothing. I'm gonna post the link to this on Twitter so that folks can see it. And then I think we can get started. I mean, I'm not gonna start right away. This is one of those things where I think I have to wait for people to show up. But I'm looking at the comment section, and if I scroll down, I can see questions. So I think I've got everything here. So hopefully people can show up and we'll see how we go. I actually have no idea whether or not I, like, you know, the degree to which I can see people being here or not. But that's all right. Hopefully I will have some friends. And if you're friends in the chat, I think one of the things that Sarah, bless you, Sarah, I don't know, Sarah, if you're here, but she told me is that I'm going to receive comments and questions on a kind of pretty severe delay. So, and I'm going to say this a couple of times for people that kind of come in later, but if you have a question or if you have a comment or whatever, just like post it as you know, as it comes to you. Don't wait until the end of anything. Don't, you know, because it'll show up and, you know, maybe I will answer a question in between poems. Like maybe I'll do something like that if I see things coming up. So let's see. I guess I can introduce myself because Facebook Live is strange that way. You can't get a double screen. I'm Kimberly Quiogue Andrews. I'm a poet who currently lives in Maryland, although I'm from Pennsylvania, originally from Eastern Pennsylvania. And I am the author of a couple of poetry collections. The one I'm going to be reading from today looks like this, is called A Brief History of Fruit. It was published just this past year, actually, right at the beginning of the pandemic by the University of Akron Press. So much love to my editors there, Mary and Thea, and my designer, Amy, and everybody else there. And then I have a chapbook of poems called Between, which was released a couple years ago from Finishing Line Press. And I teach at Washington College, which is a small liberal arts college on the eastern shore of Maryland. So the eastern shore of Maryland is like, you know, the regular bit of Maryland. And there's like the Delaware bit of Maryland. It's that side. And I did my undergraduate at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And so like I lived in Maryland for 4 years without ever having gone to the eastern shore. So it was quite a shock going over there and being like, oh, they just like took a part of Iowa and just like transposed it to the eastern shore. And that is effectively the eastern shore of Maryland. And so that's normally where I live. Although right now I am very, very lucky to be decamped for the moment in central Maine, which is why everything behind me is made of pine trees. And so what else can I tell you about myself? I'm also a literary critic. So I have, you know, the sort of requisite terminal degree in poetry, then MFA in poetry, but I also have a PhD in literature. So I write literary criticism about poetry. And so I work on scholarly books and poetry books kind of at the same time. Well, sort of at the same time. I find it very difficult to actually work on those two things simultaneously. And so I kind of flip back and forth from style to style, or from mode to mode, I suppose, hat to hat. And so right now I'm working on a new book of poems because I just finished a book of criticism, which will hopefully hit bookstores at some point in the future. Right. What else? I'm not going to go through the sort of, normally the introduction is to like, you know, so-and-so has won this award, that award has gone this grant and that grant, which would sound completely ridiculous if I were to give it for myself. And so I am not going to do that. I am instead going to go ahead and make sure that I have everything, that I'm looking at the right windows here, that I make sure that I can see the questions and the comments and everything else. I've never done this before. Like, I'm not on Facebook. Like, I've done plenty of things like this on Zoom, but Facebook, and I know, or Instagram, I've not done Instagram Live either. And so I know that, like, when you view the Instagram Live photos, you see those little like emojis like float up in the screen. I for some weird reason, I have this terrible feeling that I'm not gonna be able to see that, which sucks because I would like to see funny little emojis like floating up, but unfortunately, I don't think that that's going to happen. So, all right, we're about 5 minutes in, which means that I think I should probably kind of roll to a start here. Again, it's really hard for me to see if anyone's there unless people comment. And so if you are there and you want to say hi, that's like the way to do it. There's no other way for me to see whether or not you're in the room, which again is very, very strange to me. I'm like talking into this funny, strange void. And I will kind of like just kind of get started with reading. Again, I can see I have a comments bar that I can see on my screen, and there's also a question feature down. Well, I don't know where it's showing up for you, but for me, I have to scroll down to get it. So you can put comments and questions in either place. But if you want me to see it like right away with the delay that Facebook has on the screen that I have right now, you should put it in the comments section. I'm happy to answer questions that show up in the comments section. That's totally cool. So, feel free to ask any questions that you might have about process or about the poems themselves or about me or anything, or, if you're someone that hasn't seen me in a while, because Facebook is weird like that, feel free to say hi. So, all right, like I said, this is the book. It's got a really loud cover, and if anyone's tuning in that doesn't really know the sort of backstory of the book or hasn't visited the press page yet, it moves back and forth between Pennsylvania, or like the United States, but mostly Pennsylvania, mostly rural Pennsylvania, actually, which is where my dad grew up, and the Philippines, which is where my mother was born. My mom came over to the United States at a relatively young age, and was kind of subject to, I guess, victim of, went through a process of the kind of classic 1950s, 60s style, like American assimilation process where, it was, if you were going to be an immigrant in the United States of America, you're going to be American. And so, she never really had any interest in going back to the Philippines until I was in graduate school. And I was like, I don't really know what to write about. So, I was writing poems about this and that, and I kind of lit on the they always say write what you know, and I was actually starting to write into what I didn't know, which was like, like what is my own relationship with my racial heritage? I hadn't really ever examined that in detail because it was never something we talked about. And so I started writing that. I started writing around that, and then I realized I needed to go to the Philippines in order for it to make any sense. And so I did that, and it totally completely rearranged the way that I thought about how this book was going to unfold, how my poems were going to unfold. And so it moves back and forth across those things. So you'll see in the poems both an examination of what it means to not really be from rural Pennsylvania, but like have that in your blood, as it were, and not to be from the Philippines, but have that in your blood as well. And particularly in the sort of the Filipino poems, or the ones that are set in the Philippines, or the ones that talk about the Philippines, there's also this sort of like looming specter, and it kind of comes in and out of like, thousands of years of various kinds of colonialism. The Philippines has not, been an independent country for that long, and the last colonizer that was there, were the Americans. And so even though they often think of themselves as sort of the liberators of the Philippines, and I might read a poem about that actually. But so all of that is sort of like packed in there. So I'm going to have a read around in the book a little bit. I'm going to try to find the ones that are the most kind of bird's eye overview-y, because I know there's probably some folks on the feed that like just have no idea what this book even is. And so I'm going to start actually with just the first poem in the book, just the thing that's supposed to set the stage. And it's called Still Life with Metalworking Shop. And my grandfather on my dad's side, so my white grandfather, was a gunsmith, and he had a gunsmithing shop in the basement of the house my dad grew up in. And so this takes place there. And so the still life with metalworking shop references, like, you're supposed to imagine that you're looking at a painting. And that the plaques that come next to paintings in museums, this is supposed to be like, it's a riff on the text that you usually find next to those pieces. So this is still life with metalworking shop. Central Pennsylvania, circa 1960, ink on paper. In this scene, we can see that the catalog of the gone records itself among the catalog that remains. The objects resting in partial shadow upon the higher shelves, a single heat-proof glove, 14 nails in a box marked Pepsi Cola, fluid in a jar, most readily draw the eye, creating a sense of mystery but also directing the gaze eventually downward, as if through layers of soil. Particularly evocative in this instance, not often found in the still life, artists preferring the fruits of the hunt, or as is well known, literal fruit, are the boxes and boxes of relatively small caliber bullets, slotted into a custom-built storage unit, indicating that this shop was used almost exclusively for the fashioning of rifles. Suggestive of the card catalogs that once lined library walls, the array of ammunition invites the viewer to think about the organizational qualities of violence. An oiled rag indicates attention to detail. Questions for art educators. How does this scene juxtapose nostalgia and the domination of man over nature? What physical sensations are evoked by the hard lines of the anvil in the lower right-hand side of the frame? How do those sensations contrast with those produced by the empty, wheeled wooden chair, center off left, rolled slightly away from a desk upon which rest yet more bullets, some graph paper, writing utensils, and other things now lost to the mind trying to retrieve this picture for the viewer? How do you think the owner of this chair might react if his son married someone who was not white? If you or a family member has ever aimed a gun at an animal, perhaps the array of tools scattered about the scene will hold a special meaning. You can write these down on paper, and they will become a bouquet of pheasants, flushed and fleeing. So that's the first poem in the book. Again, hoping everybody can see me. I have no idea if everyone can see me. If you're just tuning in now, this is the Poets in Pajamas reading series. I'm Kimberly Quiogue Andrews. I'm reading from my book, A Brief History of Fruit. And feel free to leave any comments or questions or anything at all in the comment section so that I get to them. I feel like I should check with my partner who is downstairs, like whether or not he can see this. I have no clue. All right, so let's see. What else can I read from this book here? So I have relatively bothersome, it's not severe, but it's relatively bothersome scoliosis. And I have crap joints, like my shoulders are weird, I've got weird knees. And so I often complain to my mother about this because what other kinds of conversations do you have with your mother if not complaining about your joints? And so this one is about that in a way, but of course it's also about more than that. And it's called Notes on the Spine, Part 2. There's a Notes on the Spine, Part 1, but I'm not going to read it because it's a weird, long, strange poem like this. But this is the second part of that. It's right after it, called Notes on the Spine, Part 2. We hinge like puppets until we don't. I call my mother to tell her about a new pain in my knee, and she tells me I'm just getting old. That's just the way things are now. She's probably right, but I hear my dad in the background saying, Thelma, don't be a bad mom. I probe my patella on its bed of tendons, my achy hips in their sockets. You're not a bad mom, I say, just a mean one. We laugh. The joke is that Asian mothers are blunt, like ball-peen hammers, precise in their denting. That my frame is now wonky from the repeated blows. Of course, this metaphor makes no sense. Of course, she loves her daughters better than her mother loved her. But that's a joke now, too. Bimby, you got fat. I, on the other hand, have always been told that I would learn to love the legs I thought were too gangly and pale. That I, in some important sense, would form a lovely shape. No risk of me getting called a chink on the soccer field. My mother does not understand my anxieties. This is fair in some ways. After all, I have been given everything this country asks for. I'm sorry your joints hurt, my mother says. You grew too fast. All right. Apparently I've gotten text messages that say, you know, commenting and liking. I can see no comments, which is just like the craziest thing. Maybe they'll show up. Maybe they'll show up in like 10 minutes. Like maybe they'll show up afterwards and I'll be able to see what is happening here. But just so that you know, comments are not coming through for me, at least not yet. And so like maybe I'll start seeing them at some point. That would be lovely. But I can't see them now. So, you know, bear with me as I deal with this strange format that is Facebook Live. All right, what else can I read for you? See, this is why I wish the comments worked, because then I can ask, I do this with my students. I ask them, what do you want to, you know, if they're like, oh, you know, Professor Andrews, can you read a poem? I ask them, what do you want to hear a poem about? And they're like, can we ask about anything? And I was like, well, basically, and nobody has given me anything that I haven't been able to at least pretend that I've written a poem about yet. So let's see what else here. We got more texts. Thanks. Then Becca, you're here. You just texted me and you're all commenting and I can't see it. Oh God, I love the internet. I love plague times. I love this pandemic. All right. Well, what was I going to say? All right. I'm going to read. What am I going to read? Let's read the poem about the faculty meeting. I think I said I was going to do this on Twitter, and so I actually will just do it. Where is it? Let's see. Where did I put that poem? Right. You can see me flipping pages here. There we go. All right. So this poem, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it's also, you know, not. So this poem is called, and it's pretty self-explanatory, in which there are several half-Asian folks at a faculty meeting. Oh, and if any of my Washington College colleagues are on this call, stream, whatever it is, this is not a Washington College faculty meeting, mostly because we don't actually have any half-Asian people. So this is not there. In which there are several half-Asian folks at a faculty meeting about increasing diversity. And someone says, well, as you can see, we are all white here. Perhaps we will never figure out the mechanism behind the yawn's contagion. Perhaps the truth is that we are sometimes reminded that we have not actually been breathing, that our chests are screaming for air, which moves over the vocal cords with the pressure of a train on its tracks. Well, but I'm the spring crocus, early and purple and cream, a joy and a silence opening to let the air in. What? And the answer is nothing, and the answer is everything, and the answer is a series of silhouettes against the sharp poster board of one's presumptive motions in a room. Perhaps the truth is that the white, crocus or otherwise, blooms first from winter's fist, that it is not spring, that it is still winter. As we can see, as far as we know, we, the quiet of yes. Now is not the time. You say yes. You allow the discussion to move on. This is good. See, you are hearing me right now. All right. Now I'm getting a whole stream of, I'm glad I announced that, because I'm getting this whole stream of like random texts from people saying that they can see me, which is good. So I guess if you have my phone number, that's excellent. So I'm seeing, oh, I see. We can see in here. Oh, so it's okay. That's the problem. It's coming up. The comments are actually not coming up on the live screen. They're coming up on the actual event page. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pause this reading. I'm not going to pause the live stream, obviously, but I'm going to open up the actual event itself and look for comments there. We'll see whether or not Facebook can handle opening two things at once. Let's find out. So let's see. If I go to the event page, can I actually see what's happening? Probably not. I'm going to discussion. Is there a discussion? There's probably no discussion. No, I have no clue. All right, well, I would like to thank Kate. It was a Kate. Kate, I think you sent me. Yes, you sent me. Oh, right. You can see comments. People are there. Oh, that's so nice. I'm glad. Okay, so those of you that are sending me screenshots of the fact that there are people watching, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I have no clue where I'm supposed to see those, but that's fine. Alas for me. All right, well, I'll just keep reading them. And, if I later I will go back and I'll try to find those comments. And if there are any questions in those comments, I will answer them via text. So like I won't answer them live. If I can't see them, I can't answer them live, but I can answer them later. So like, don't just because like I can't see the comments, it doesn't mean that like, I won't be able to answer your question. So like, feel free to type them in there. I will go find them, whatever it takes. I will go find them and I will answer them if you have them. All right. So let's see. What else should I read here? I'll read the poem about the Second World War because I think probably some of you that are on this feed have already heard this poem, so I apologize for that. But I did make a reference to thinking about the way in which this book developed and thinking about the way in which, as it developed, I started thinking harder and more critically about the relationship between the United States and the Philippines, which, like anybody that's been thinking about that, and there are a lot of particularly Filipino Americans that have been thinking about that super critically since like they could walk, and I am not one of those people, so I came to it really late, and so I had a lot of work to do, and I still have a lot of work to do, and I will keep doing that work, but I tried to write some of that work into the book. And so one of these is, so my grandmother is from Leyte, which is not Manila. So Manila is kind of near the top of the Philippines. If you think of the Philippines as a kind of group of islands, she's from the Visayas, which are the middle part. Oh, I'm getting a question. Somebody wants me to explain the title of the book. All right, hold please. And I will come back to that. So anyway, so my grandmother, has an ancestral home which has this, it's made of wood and it has a banister. And so during World War II, that house was hit with Japanese shrapnel and it tore off a chunk of the banister. And that mark in the wood is still there. Like it's still there when you go there, you can see it. And so I wrote a poem that was shaped like the divot. And unfortunately, because of the way that book layouts have to happen, it got split between two pages. But if you can see here on your screen, I'm gonna hold it up like this. It's shaped like a wedge. Some people think it's shaped like a tornado, which I guess like that's also fine. But it's shaped like that divot. And it's called, the title is semi-ironic, but also not. It's called No One Needs Another Poem About the Second World War. It is a commonplace that history is received. Nevertheless, the flecks left behind by the eraser are more often than not the color of sunburn. There are two general stances on memory: fixing cereal for breakfast every morning and the nationalization of the cereal industry. I do not understand why these positions are often regarded as incompatible with one another. I am walking up the ironwood stairs of my Lola's ancestral home, my hand on the banister, soft with polish. In its middle, a long, dark wedge creases the wood, a divot that looks like the drape of fabric, smooth edges, and pooling shadow. Time, in other words, makes surfaces less jagged, everything else more so. I've heard enough stories about the embedded shrapnel to know that in the film version of my life, there will be salt and metal in every flashback. Leyte is famous for witnessing the triumphant return of the American Army, General MacArthur as the Terminator, etc., etc. When the Japanese soldiers showed up at my great-aunt's door, my Lola coughed violently, pretended she had TB. There were U.S. medics hiding upstairs. Who, in other words, is saving whom? The monument to American heroism in Palo consists of the general and several soldiers emerging from the water like mermen. We now know the sea will reclaim them as it reaches with growing swiftness towards my hand on this railing in this house where I am drowning already. It's just occurred to me to read a poem I don't actually usually read, but I think is a good one for perhaps this audience. And when I first went to the Philippines, I was kind of in this kind of crazy educational program. There was actually like a kind of it was an education sort of like left political activism. So it was perfect for me, but I had no idea that that's what it was going to be. But we, got to meet a bunch of people across the country in various states of sort of political disrepair. And, you had the sense that like while you were learning a great deal, you were participating in an economy that has, is, if not voluntarism itself, exactly, because it's not like you're going over and you're like, building a house that a local could have built and then being like, this is good. And then, it wasn't that, but it was like adjacent to that. And so this poem kind of tries to think through that a little bit because I went up to the sort of north of Manila to Bulacan, and we met a bunch of farmers there that are like, they're subsistence farmers, and they were, kind of tilling incredibly steep land with the sort of water buffalo that rural Filipinos use to do this, called carabao. And so we all got to sort of try plowing a field with a carabao. And, on the one hand, you're like, oh, you get a really great appreciation for how hard that is. But also you're sort of like, these Americans, Filipino Americans, but like Americans like coming in and being like, ah, yeah, this is really hard, and then leaving. And so this is about that. In which voluntarism, Bulacan province. Learning by doing. The story where you begin saying, actually, in our defense. The story where you are not handing shoes to the shoeless. The story where you and 8 of your Phil-Am friends are taken by trikes up to the hills north of Manila, and you lose track of where you are until you are in an impoverished rural community, and even then, obviously, you are lost. The story where you are not helping. The story where you're not helping is in fact the whole point, though you will not be told this. Posthumanism. There is a communal carabao, and you take turns trying to steer her and the plow she pulls through the soil. It is the animal you speak of, because you are more at ease projecting sympathies onto something that doesn't know about it. Global warming. The carabao has a calf, and the calf knocks over a small banana tree in its romping. The carabao has a calf, and you can only think of the way in which your t-shirt is a poncho of sweat. The carabao has a calf, and you fling weeds this way and that. The carabao has a calf, and will the weeds simply root again where you have flung them is a question you have, but you do not know the answer, and you are just doing what your 8 friends are doing. The carabao has a calf, and see above and see nitpicking as both a reassertion of a type of hierarchy, as well as something that you are loath to describe your host doing to her patient daughters. The carabao has a calf, and later you reread Bishop's 2,000 illustrations and a complete concordance, and you put your head into your hands. Here. Pandan is a grass. The weather is clear. The grass smells like coconut. You can put the grass into your rice cooker, and the rice will end up smelling and tasting a bit like coconut. You can also work it into gelatin and milk products. These are a common component of halo-halo, the national dessert of the Philippines, according to most people. You can make halo-halo when ice is available. Pandan is a tall grass. Bushels of it can be tied together with strips ripped from an old t-shirt. Pandan can be given to you by a woman whose field you have incompetently tilled for an hour. You can take this pandan from her, and you can put it in your rice cooker back in Manila. This backwards gift economy smells a bit like coconut. Pandan is abundant. Your concern for her livelihood is also abundant. You eat the pandan. You eat your concern. Let's see. I'm going to move back to the United States. Actually, oh, you know what? I'm going to read a poem that is set where I am. But let me see what I've got here. A poem on it. Wait, hold on a second. Oh, Sarah, you want to know about the poem? More about the title of the book. Wait, if so, Max, a poem on it. If you mean the Stephen King book, actually, I'm sort of surprised I don't have a poem in this book about it, because it is one of the books that I've read more than almost any other like horror novel. I've read a lot of Stephen King. Like, I know we all have our sort of like issues with Stephen King, but I grew up reading a bunch of Stephen King books, and it scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. But you know what I am going to do? Instead of reading a poem on it, I will read a poem about Maine, which is where I am. And then Sarah, I'll get to your question at the end, like thinking about the title of the book. But if there are any other questions, I think a couple of my friends, bless you, thank you, Kate, thank you, Alex, thank you, Jamie, for just send them along, and I will answer them based on what I can see that my friends are sending to me. So bless this community. All right. So this is set in Maine. This is as close to a poem on it that I have. And it's called On Labor. Belgrade Lakes, Maine. The long days of summer are a false solace. More time awake means more time to witness your dreams fodder. At the small lakeside cabin that my grandfather built, like a brick shithouse, my own father, grumbling, struggling to budge thick cedar planking off of a chest full of sheets. I once watched a boyfriend take it upon himself to clean out our old aluminum canoe, perched on its tiny horses next to the shed. One way to explain the enormous appeal of Gustav Klimt's paintings might be to argue that his faces are essentially melancholic, surrounded by the ecstatic. The real, that is, emerging in a certain flesh tone, out of a sea of gold and green. I am not a woman in a patterned yellow dress. My face is, however, covered by this hand. Polycrystalline and growing, the moment forms itself from salt and sugar, all those parallel edges. In the 3 ages of woman, it is the hag who appears pregnant. The decades of my brain produce the men in this story. The paterfamilias, either one, in a cove into which I cannot reach. The boyfriend carrying the canoe atop his bare shoulders, staggering slightly under its weight. A tottering, tipped vessel, grown legs, and out onto the lake. Men, a mosaic. The desperately uncomfortable eroticism of this memory of work. His steadying arms, the kneeling, the motions of small waves against aluminum and a heavy sponge against neglect's many accumulations. The shifting of musculature under skin, the promise, as I took it, of an ability to force the rocks along the shore back together in the thin spring. After the ice steals in, expands in its usual way, cracks even the hardest surfaces, then turns again to water. I get another question here. Oh, IT was infotech. Well, sorry, you got a poem that was about Maine, which is, Stephen King, the book. Do I have any poems about computers? Let's see. I don't think I do. So you stumped me. At least not in this book. I've definitely written about like being on my phone and stuff in other contexts. But I want to get to Sarah's question, and kind of as we start to sort of wrap things up here. So I'm not keeping you all too long, which is the title of the book. So for whatever reason, I found myself thinking about a lot. Thinking aloud. I don't know. Like I found myself writing a lot about fruit. Like, the idea that fruit is, it's a reproductive organ. It is the way in which plants reproduce. It is something edible. It's nourishing. This idea of seed, right, of obviously like cross-pollination, crossbreeding, things like that. I didn't think of it actively like that, but like there was some, like fruit kept coming up in the poems. And I was like, I am just writing a lot about, it's not other kinds of food. Like I've got a couple of other like moments in the book where like I talk about like Philippine, traditional Filipino dishes like adobo and, sinigang and stuff. But really there's not a lot of food in the book. There's just a lot of fruit in the book. And I think that has something to do with this idea of like, like where do we come from, right? Like what bears us and what do we bear? And so I think for this sort of, I'm going to read this last poem. If there's, again, more stuff, if you have questions that you have, I have a wonderful set of people that are forwarding me the questions that I can't see. And, I will, again, answer and respond to any other sort of questions that I get or comments that I get as I kind of get those from folks. So This, I think, will be, because we've been here for about 35 minutes, this will be the last poem that I read, and it's the title poem. So Sarah, here's your title poem from the book. It's called A Brief History of Fruit. These were the years in which I saw myself an apple, blushing from red to yellow and back again. My father puts a box of clementines on the counter. As an oncologist, he does not grow things, but causes them to cease to grow. Recompense is a fancy way of saying that we believe in the finite quality of deeds. Sometimes I sit with a peach under my nose and allow it to change the air there, an indentation labeled peach. At some point, everyone's family had to deal with the question of sustenance. It's how they answered the question that leads to both agriculture and geopolitics. I love the multiple ways in which one can use the word cultivation. There are so many things to be coaxed out of wherever they're hiding. What does it mean, anyway, to live in a country? I wouldn't know. I go to the store and shop for the avocados that feel like they might ripen in a few days because I harbor a deep distrust of immediate satisfaction. I keep telling myself that naming everything I've eaten will convince various juries that I am not guilty. Raspberry, cherry, coconut, santol, passion fruit, dislike. Apricot, lychee, mango, blueberry. So many different centers. Some that you can bite right through, some that you can drink, and some that will crack your teeth apart. Writing about seeds means also to write about permission, which could be pretty revolutionary if you think about it. All right. So I think I will stop there. Let me make sure that I don't have anything that I absolutely need to. Well, I can see. So luckily, people have been sending me screenshots, so I can see that Russell is here. Hi, Russell and Becca. That, let's see. What else do we have here? Oh, a couple of nice. Michael Wells, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the comments. Oh, Bill, hi, Bill. You're here. Do you see your poems in dialogue with other specific poets or poems? Man, why do you gotta ask such difficult questions? So, in general, like I can say, like, you know, who was I reading when I was writing this book? And that's probably the closest I can give you to an answer, which is to say that, like, you know, am I in dialogue with anyone in particular? Like, I think one of the poets that was an enormous influence on the first draft of this book, less so on the revision, but the first draft of the book, was Amy Neshukumatahil. She's a half Indian, half Filipino poet who wrote a couple of books published by Tupelo Press: Miracle at the Drive-In Volcano. No, Miracle Fruit and At the Drive-In Volcano. Those are two separate books. And those two books were like, oh, like that was like a permission giving moment. Like, oh, somebody else is writing poems about this sort of like weird biracial heritage and like what that's like to feel split between two cultures. And her poems were like these kind of narrative, kind of tight narrative poems that were sort of crystal clear and beautiful. And so that was a huge influence on the first draft of the book. When I went back through it like 7 years later and effectively wrote it again, I was thinking more like, I guess I was thinking more politically about what I was doing. And so like Monica Ong's visual poems were an enormous influence on the creation of this book. Jennifer Chang's work also. Who else was I reading? I'm never not reading John Ashbery, and so a lot of my sort of like more rambly poems, I think, are indebted to him. And I'm thinking about poems in dialogue with other specific poets or poems. I think that's probably, I mean, one of the epigraphs from one of my poems is from Lee Young Lee, who was again an early, more than a later kind of influence. I'll have, you know, like Bill, I talk to you fairly frequently, so I will have more to say about that when I can think harder about it. But those are the kinds of those poets were the poets that sort of allowed me to write the book in the first place and then helped me to revise it, right? Those are the ways that I would think about, you know, being in dialogue with, right? Rather than in any other sense. Let's see. Oh, thanks, Russell, for the comments. And I don't see any other questions coming up or any other requests for poems about strange subjects. But like I said, if you know, it's very easy to find and to get this book. You just have to go to the University of Akron's website. It's actually the link is both in the description of the event and in this live stream's description. And hopefully when we like are able to see each other again, like I would be more than happy to like write something in it for you. But for those of you that came and for those of you that listened in, I am so pleased that you did. I'm so pleased that you decided to join me tonight, you know, across time and across space. This is just such a strange time to be. I mean, it's a strange time to be anyone. It's a very strange time to be a writer. It's the only sort of, you know, being that I know, but it's real weird. And so, you know, the weird silver lining of this is that, like, you know, if I were doing this in a bookshop or whatever, only people that lived within driving distance of the bookshop could come. But it looks like what I've got is a bunch of people that are not geographically close to one another, being able to sort of share in this moment. And so I really, really appreciate all of you for coming. And like I said, I will go through and I will like enthusiastically like all of your comments. And if there are any questions that pop up afterwards, I will answer them via text. But again, thank you so much for coming. And the rest of the Poets in Pajamas series is going to be absolute fire. So, you know, if you have tuned in the past, please keep tuning in. And if you have not and you came here and this was interesting to you, there are lots more events on the Poets in Pajamas page. And we hope to see you at a future event. But for now, I will let you go have a drink, have a dinner, do whatever you got to do. And again, thank you so much for being here. I will see you soon, hopefully.